I'm not the kind of person who makes dramatic statements at work. I'm the quiet guy in the analytics corner, the one who fixes things at 11 p.m., the one everyone assumes just likes numbers, the one who doesn't take credit because he doesn't have the energy to argue about whose idea it was. So when my boss looked me straight in the eye during a team meeting, HR on the call, senior management listening in, and said, "I'm not going to support a lazy, useless employee." You'd think I would have snapped, but I didn't, because by that point, he had no idea who he was actually talking to. Let me start where the cracks began. I joined the company 3 years ago, a mid-level data analyst surrounded by people who were older, louder, or better at pretending to be busy. My boss, Daniel, wasn't incompetent. He was worse. He was charming, charismatic, the kind of man who could talk for 45 minutes about strategic data transformation without touching a keyboard once. He liked to hover behind my chair and say something like, "Make sure this report goes out by noon," even though he knew I'd finished it the night before. He enjoyed using corporate phrases like, "Oh, own your workflow," and "actionable insights." But if you asked him how a pivot table worked, he'd blink like you'd insulted his bloodline. And I, stupidly, quietly, held everything up. When dashboards broke, I fixed them. When forecasting models failed at 2 a.m., I rebuilt them. When a last-minute meeting needed numbers no one had prepared, Daniel sent a Slack message with 3 words. "Can you cover?" I always did. I wrote scripts that automated half our reporting, but Daniel presented them to leadership like they were some kind of divine inspiration he'd received in a dream. He once asked me to remove my initials from the source code because they were distracting. I didn't argue. I just kept working. People assume burnout is loud. They imagine the moment you stand up, slam your laptop shut, and walk out. But real burnout is silent. You don't explode. You dim. For me, it started with a single night. 1:47 a.m., a broken dataset, Daniel's Slack message lighting up my screen. "I need these fixed before morning. Leadership wants clean numbers." He didn't ask if I was awake. He knew I would be. I sat there staring at the message, hearing my own heartbeat, louder than the computer fan. Then, for reasons I still can't fully explain, I replied with 2 words I'd never used before. "Tomorrow morning." No apology, no explanation, just a boundary. It felt like dropping a brick into still water. My chest tightened. My hands shook. But I did it again the next day, and again the week after that. I stopped logging in late at night. I stopped staying after hours to prep his decks. I stopped being Daniel's safety net. And that was when he decided I was lazy. Not because I slacked off. I didn't. Not because my performance dropped. It didn't. But because I stopped doing his job for him. Because I stopped being convenient. He didn't confront me at first. He tried sarcasm. Little jabs like, "Hope you're not too overwhelmed doing the basics." Or, "Must be nice having all that free time in your evenings." But when sarcasm didn't work, he escalated. It happened on a Tuesday morning. Team sync. HR dialed in for routine check-ins. The senior manager joined unexpectedly. Daniel smelled an audience. He started with a sigh, his signature, and said, "Before we move on, we need to address an ongoing performance issue." My stomach tightened, but I stayed silent. He clicked his pen, leaned back like a judge delivering a sentence, and said, "Some employees," he glanced at me, "aren't showing initiative. They've become slow, resistant to feedback. Frankly, the team can't depend on them." HR shifted. Someone muted themselves. My coworker Mia's eyes widened at her screen. Daniel continued, now emboldened. "I'm not going to support a lazy, useless employee who holds everyone else back." The call went dead quiet. And there I was, sitting with months of quietly documented overtime, Slack timestamps, project logs, evidence of who actually did the work he took credit for, screenshots, emails, version histories, the whole thing. He didn't know any of that. He didn't know that the forecasting model he bragged about last quarter was entirely mine. He didn't know that leadership's favorite dashboard had my name buried in the metadata. He didn't know I'd been recording meeting summaries, because HR once suggested I track communication flow. He didn't know his power over me had already dissolved the moment I stopped being afraid of losing this job. He thought he was humiliating me. He thought this was his moment. But what he didn't know was simple. I had stopped being his employee the moment he called me lazy. I had already begun gathering every piece of truth he believed I'd never use. And this meeting, this little public performance he staged, it was the last thing he should have ever done. That was the moment I decided I wasn't going to let him speak for me ever again. And that, as I would learn very soon, was only the beginning. I didn't sleep much that night, not because I was upset, but because for the first time in years, I felt something unfamiliar moving through me. Clarity. The kind that doesn't whisper. The kind that sharpens every memory until it stops feeling like confusion and starts feeling like evidence. People think the worst part of an abusive work environment is the workload. It's not. It's the gaslighting. The constant drip of, "Are you sure you didn't forget?" Or, "I thought we agreed you'd handle that." Or, "I never said that," even when your inbox holds 20 emails proving he did. Daniel had been doing it for years. Little things at first. He'd accidentally delete my name from a project recap before forwarding it to leadership. He'd ask me to double-check his numbers, then present the corrected version as if he'd spent all weekend troubleshooting. He'd interrupt me during presentations but insist I should work on confidence during performance cycles. Then came the bigger slights. The times he blocked raises because your communication could be stronger, even though I was the one coaching new hires. The times he pushed back promotions because I need you where you are. The times he laughed with the other managers about how Grant just loves spreadsheets too much to argue. 1,000 paper cuts that felt like routine until your skin finally remembers pain. That night, after the meeting, I opened my laptop at home. Not to work, but to organize. I created folders, subfolders, timestamps, every incident neatly labeled, every Slack message saved, every deck version showing who actually made the edits. I had never intended to use any of it. But that meeting, that sentence, lazy, useless, it flipped something. The next morning at work, Daniel walked in with his usual false brightness. Loud steps, louder greetings, the kind of confidence born from never being challenged. "Grant," he said, tapping my monitor with the back of his knuckle, "let's sync at 2. We've got to talk expectations." Expectations, a word he used when he wanted to blame me for something he forgot to do. "2 works," I replied calmly, and then I watched him walk away, unaware that everything he'd built around himself, every illusion, was starting to tilt. Over the next week, I did something radical. I did my job. Only my job. No covering, no late-night fixes, no invisible labor. It took exactly 2 days before Daniel started to unravel. First came the frantic pings. "Hey, quick question on the dashboard. Looks off?" "I need the forecast adjusted before my meeting." "Can you jump on a call real quick?" Real quick was always code for my mistake is now your emergency. I replied to each message the same way. "Documentation is in the shared drive." Or, "Looks like your numbers don't match ours. Want me to loop in the team?" Or my favorite, "I'm on another task. Can you clarify the priority with leadership?" He hated that last one. He hated when I showed I wasn't afraid to involve people who actually understood the work. By Thursday, he asked me to step into a conference room. His smile was thin, more like a stretched apology he didn't intend to make. "Grant, I'm concerned about your attitude." "My attitude?" "Yes. You're distant, less collaborative. This isn't the version of you I can recommend for advancement." There it was, the leverage he thought he still had. I folded my hands. "Daniel, I've been doing everything outlined in my job description. Nothing less." He blinked, surprised I wasn't apologizing. "Well," he said slowly, "you're not going above and beyond anymore." "I know," I said. That part is intentional." For a moment, just a moment, His mask slipped. The irritation underneath showed, but he forced a laugh. "We'll revisit this during your performance cycle." I nodded. He didn't know I was already preparing for it, but that was just the surface. The real shift came the following Tuesday at 10:14 a.m. It was a financial review meeting, senior manager present, a couple of department heads, me and Daniel, who was leading the call, or trying to. He shared a deck, one I hadn't touched. His numbers didn't match the financial systems. His graphs contradicted our actual quarterly reports. His forecast model was 2 months outdated, a train wreck you can see happening in slow motion. Our director interrupted 5 slides in. "Daniel, where did these figures come from?" I watched Daniel's throat tighten. He glanced at me in panic. The way someone looks for a life preserver their shore is still floating nearby. "Grant," he said, "want to walk us through the data set?" I met his eyes, steady. "I didn't prepare this deck," I said plainly. I wasn't asked. Silence. A good, heavy silence. Daniel scrambled. "Well, you've been our main data person, so our documentation for the correct numbers is in the shared drive," I said. "If you want, I can pull up the accurate version." More silence, this time with oxygen leaving Daniel's side of the room. The director sighed. "Let's reschedule. We're not reviewing inaccurate data." Call ended. Meeting over. Daniel stormed into my workspace the moment his screen went black. "What the hell was that?" he hissed. "What was what?" I asked, still typing. "You humiliated me." I looked up, calm. "I didn't make the deck. You could have backed me up." I closed my laptop. "I don't fix things last minute anymore." His jaw clenched hard enough to creak. "You're becoming a problem." I didn't answer. I didn't need to. Because that moment, his anger, his desperation, his first taste of being held accountable, that was the first small fracture in the facade he'd built. A micro-catharsis. A tiny breath of justice. He thought it was a bad day. He thought he'd get over it. He had no idea how far this was about to go. And he definitely didn't know I was done saving a man who never once saved me. The thing about people like Daniel is that they don't panic right away. They cling to the illusion of control the same way a drowning man clings to the idea that he can still breathe underwater if he just tries harder. For a week or two after the deck disaster, he acted like nothing had happened. A few shallow jokes, a few awkward attempts at friendliness, even a "Hey buddy, how's your workload?" thrown in with the desperation of someone trying to patch a sinking balloon with tape. But the problem wasn't the balloon. It was the hole he'd carved in it himself. The performance review cycle was coming, and Daniel walked into it with the confidence of a man who still believed he could rewrite reality if he talked fast enough. I already knew what was coming. I'd heard him in the break room whispering to another manager, low and smug, "He's not delivering the same value. He's slipping." Slipping. If only he knew how much of the department had been resting on work I'd stopped doing. By the time review day arrived, I wasn't nervous. I wasn't angry. I was steady, like someone who has already accepted the outcome and prepared his footing long before stepping into the fire. The meeting was at 3 p.m., small glass conference room. HR rep on one side, VP of operations joining remotely. Daniel sitting across from me, flipping his pen in the air like he was rehearsing authority. "Thanks for joining," HR began. "We're here to go over your annual performance evaluation." Daniel cleared his throat and jumped in before she could continue. He wanted the stage. "Well, I'll start," he said, leaning back. "Grant's performance this year has been inconsistent." He said inconsistent the way some people say contaminated. "I've noticed a lack of engagement, resistance to feedback, and a failure to meet expectations for someone at his level. He's become slow, unresponsive, and is no longer a reliable team player." HR nodded politely, taking notes she would later treat like potential evidence. Daniel continued, sensing approval he hadn't actually earned. "I'm not going to support a lazy, useless employee in this department. Not anymore." The words landed exactly the way he intended. Sharp, humiliating, designed to sting. But sting requires surprise, and I wasn't surprised anymore. I let a quiet moment pass, the kind of silence that has weight. Then I opened my folder. Inside was not just documentation, it was a mirror, and I turned it toward him slowly, page by page. Before we continue, I said, my voice even, I want to clarify a few things. Everything I'm about to show you is time-stamped, backed up, and cross-referenced with internal systems. I slid the first packet toward HR. Slack logs, dozens of after-hours requests, all from Daniel, all marked urgent, all fulfilled by me. HR's eyebrows rose as she scanned them. The next folder, email chains showing that critical deliverables were done by me, even when Daniel presented them as his own work. The next, version histories proving who actually edited the dashboards, who updated the models, who wrote the scripts, my initials, lines of code, commit logs, timestamps at 1:42 a.m., 2:13 a.m., 4:06 a.m. I've been documenting my workload for months, I said calmly, not because I anticipated this meeting, but because HR previously advised me to track communication patterns for transparency. The VP leaned forward on the screen. Grant, did you create these automation tools? Yes, I said. Every one of them. Silence again. But this time it wasn't heavy. It was shifting, like a room full of air, finally realizing which way gravity actually tilted. Daniel's face paled. He opened his mouth, but nothing came out. I wasn't done. I pulled out one more sheet, a data set showing where Daniel had manually altered numbers before presentations. Small enough changes to look like rounding adjustments, big enough to alter performance trends. I don't know if this was intentional, I said, though I knew he knew exactly what he was doing, but these changes misrepresent the actual quarter metrics. HR sat up straighter. The VP stopped blinking. Is this true? HR asked Daniel. He sputtered. I didn't. These are... He's twisting things. I didn't twist anything. I didn't have to. The forecasting model you presented last month, I continued gently, was 2 versions old. I sent the updated one twice. You ignored it. That's why the numbers didn't match. HR looked at him. Why wasn't this escalated? Daniel's lips pressed together like he was chewing the truth and didn't want to swallow it. Then came the moment. The micro-catharsis, so sharp it almost felt like a snap. The VP said quietly, HR, pause this evaluation. Effective immediately. I want an internal review, not of Grant. A beat of silence. Of Daniel. My boss's eyes went dull, like someone had turned down the wattage behind them. This is ridiculous, he managed. He's setting me up. No, I said calmly. I stopped setting you up months ago. HR looked at me. Grant, thank you for bringing this forward. We'll conduct a formal investigation. Daniel tried again. You can't just take his side. We're not taking sides, the VP interrupted. We're looking at the data, and so far it aligns with Grant. For the first time since I'd known him, Daniel had no script, no charisma, no room to maneuver. They asked him to step out of the room while they finalized next steps. He didn't argue. He didn't even look back. When the door shut, HR exhaled slowly. The VP nodded at me. You handled that professionally. But I had one more truth, just one. I should also mention, I said, that I already have an offer from another company. They reached out after seeing the tools our department uses. They assumed the creator was in leadership. The VP blinked. You? Yes. A long, thoughtful silence. Then he said, We'll talk soon. But first we need to clean this up. He meant Daniel, his mess, his lies, his arrogance. They dismissed me shortly after, thanking me again. I left the conference room feeling nothing explosive, nothing triumphant, just a quiet, settled weight lifting off my shoulders, as if the floor beneath me had finally stopped shaking. As I walked back to my desk, one thought anchored itself in my mind. They thought I was gone. I wasn't. The funny thing about endings is that they rarely arrive like explosions. Sometimes they just appear quietly, like a door closing behind you, with a sound so soft you almost miss it. Daniel didn't come back to the office the next day, or the day after. By the following Monday, his desk had been cleared, drawers emptied, nameplate gone, chair pushed neatly under the desk as if he'd never claimed the space at all. HR didn't tell the team anything dramatic. Just a short announcement during the morning stand-up. Daniel is no longer with the company. Please direct any questions to leadership. No scandal, no meeting with tissues, just a professional erasure. But people noticed the absence of noise more than noise itself, and Daniel had always been noise. Constant, scraping, loud in all the ways that didn't matter. His silence became the real announcement. Colleagues began approaching me in a slow, cautious stream. Did something happen? Are you okay? Hey, listen, I always knew you did more than he let on. Mia came by my desk and whispered, "The VP asked for access logs. They're reviewing everything. Everything." There was no satisfaction in that, just confirmation, a quiet alignment of reality. Later that week, the VP called me into his office. Not the glass conference room this time, his actual office. Bookshelves, soft lighting, framed degrees, a calm that made you sit straighter. He gestured for me to take a seat. "Grant," he said, "I'm not going to pretend this situation wasn't a failure on leadership's part. We should have caught it earlier." I didn't respond. Yeah, I didn't need to. He continued, "I've reviewed your documentation. HR has as well. We spoke with several team members independently." A pause. "You did exceptional work, and you did it under pressure no employee should absorb." Another pause, this one heavier. "We'd like you to stay, and we'd like to discuss moving you into a lead role." A year ago, that sentence would have lit a spark in me. Ambition, pride, validation. But now it just felt irrelevant, because something inside me had already shifted. "I appreciate that," I said slowly, "but I've accepted an offer elsewhere." He nodded, not surprised, not offended. "You deserve a place that respects the work you do," he said. "If you ever want to return, the door stays open." I thanked him and left his office with a strange calm settling into my spine. Not triumph, not relief, just truth. My last 2 weeks were uneventful in the best way possible. No drama, no confrontations, no desperate attempts from management to change my mind. Colleagues invited me to lunches. Mia left a thank you card on my desk. A junior analyst asked if I could walk him through one of my scripts before I left. So the team isn't helpless anymore. On my final day, the VP stopped by my desk. "I wanted to share this," he said, handing me a sheet of paper. It was a printout of the automation architecture diagram I'd built the year before. Highlighted areas showing which parts had originated from me, which parts Daniel had falsely attributed to himself. He said he wrote the forecasting logic, the VP said quietly, but the timestamp shows it was your upload at 2:41 a.m. I smiled, not from pettiness, but from the simplicity of facts. "He really didn't know how much you carried," he added. I shrugged. That's the thing. He didn't want to know. My first week at the new company felt like stepping into a room with fresh air. No suspicious glances. No late-night emergencies disguised as a collaboration. No manager hovering behind me, waiting for me to save him again. My new boss, Ellen, was the opposite of Daniel. Direct, transparent. One of those people who cared more about clarity than ego. During onboarding, she asked, "What do you need to do your best work?" No one had ever asked me that before. I told her, "A clean backlog, realistic deadlines, and people who don't lie." She laughed in a way that didn't mock. "We can work with that." The work itself wasn't glamorous. Database cleanup, forecasting improvements, revamping some outdated dashboards. But every task felt lighter because it belonged to me, not to someone else's ego. My second Friday there, I got a text from a former coworker. "Mia, they're reorganizing the whole department. Daniel's replacement is actually nice. Also, the VP said something today that sounded like a compliment for you." Me. What did he say? Mia. The system works better when the person who actually does the work gets credit. I stared at the text for a long moment. Then I set my phone down. Not angry, not smug. Just done. A month later, I ran into one of Daniel's old friends at a cafe. He looked uncomfortable when he saw me. "Hey," he said. Heard about everything. How are you?" "I'm good," I replied. It wasn't a performance. It was the truth. He hesitated. "Daniel's not taking it well." I didn't ask for details. I didn't need any. The universe doesn't need my supervision. I wished him a good day, picked up my coffee, and walked out into the sunlight. Some nights now, I sit in my apartment, with a lamp on, laptop closed, the air quiet in a way it hasn't been in years. I cook dinner. I take evening walks. I sleep without checking my phone at 2 a.m. to make sure no one's messaging me urgent requests. And it hits me in those soft moments. Peace isn't special. It isn't loud. It's just the absence of people who mistake your kindness for weakness. Daniel once told me, "You're lucky to have this job. Someone like you won't find better." He was wrong. I didn't need luck. I needed boundaries. And when he called me lazy, when he used the one word he never earned the right to use, he didn't insult me. He revealed himself. In the end, I didn't ruin his career. He did. I just stopped cleaning up after him. That was the line he never saw coming. And when I finally stepped over it, I didn't look back.